Okay, so today we're going to look at the logical problem of evil, which is in many ways different from the evidential problem and in many ways the same. The key idea and the key thing that really separates it, I suppose, is this. It's the idea that God cannot, and here's the kind of key word here, coexist with evil. Now, there's a few things I just want to unpack before we get going with this. We want to know what the word coexist means, but also I think this word is really important. What we mean here is that it's not logically possible. So, a logically possible thing is anything that isn't contradictory and that we can think of, basically. So anything, a blue, orange, or whatever, is logically possible. A floating car is logically possible, though maybe not physically possible. More's the pity. But a square circle is not logically possible. So when we say that God and evil cannot coexist, what we mean is that it is not logically possible. It can't possibly happen. And coexist means, relatively obviously, coexist means exist at the same time. So, one way of putting this is that there is no possible world or set of circumstances in which God and evil would exist at the same time. In some ways, this is a much stronger argument. I would argue it's still a posteriori in nature, so it is from the senses. Because in order to complete this argument, as we'll see in a little bit, you do need to claim that evil exists in the world. The rest of this, including this main premise, however, is a priori in nature, right? Because it's just to do with concepts. Here's how it's different, though. It's deductive. What deductive means is that if the premises are true, so if the stages in the argument are correct, then the conclusion must be true. They necessitate the conclusion. So this is as opposed to inductive reasoning. Remember, inductive reasoning is the idea that, if we have this set of data and it all suggests a probable outcome, then that outcome is probable, that conclusion's probable. Whereas this is sure, definite. If the premises are true and the logic works, then the conclusion must be true. I just also, because this is really important for our understanding of the problem of evil, I want to talk about what a contradiction is. A contradiction is normally, say, a statement that makes itself false. So I've already given you an example of that, right? Just to give you an example again, a square circle is a statement, okay? But the point is that this bit here, which is all about a shape that is round, contradicts this bit, because part of the definition of this bit is that it is a shape that has clear, straight edges. They both can't be true. So it is a contradiction. Sorry, that's a little bit messy, isn't it? But that's I ran out of space. This is why I draw myself boxes, by the way, so that I don't use up the whole space explaining what a contradiction is. So a contradiction is a sentence that contradicts itself, that makes itself false in some way. You don't need any other evidence. It's just this idea and this idea can't both be true. So you can't hold both of them at the same time. Let's move on now to the argument itself, which I'm putting down here. The argument itself, in brief, is this. We could say, number one, God and evil cannot coexist. Now, I've already said this up here. It's interesting to look at why that's the case. If we look at these three things, God's omnipotent, so he's all-powerful, he's omniscient, so he's all-knowing, and he's all-good, so he wants the best. This would seem to contradict with our idea of evil. Why? Well, because evil is this thing that is contradictory with good. So we might say that if evil exists and good exists, they would fight against each other. God's omnipotent, though, so his fighting would win, and he's omniscient, so he would know that evil exists. So if God had all of these three qualities, he would want to stop evil, that's all good. He would know that evil exists, that's omniscient, and he would be able to stop evil, so evil wouldn't exist. So you can't have, so the argument goes, both of these things existing at the same time. Hence, God and evil cannot coexist. Now we have our a posteriori premise, which is about the real world as opposed to a logical claim, which is simply that evil exists in the world. And so the conclusion is that God cannot exist. Do you see how much stronger that is in some ways than the evidential problem? Because the evidential problem is saying, you know, the evidence suggests pretty strongly that God doesn't exist. Here it's saying that God cannot possibly exist. The thing is, of course, though, that if you are religious and you want to combat the problems of evil, in some ways the logical problem is easier. All you have to do is you have to show that this premise is false, or this premise is false, and the argument falls apart. If you could, for instance, just show me one hypothetical situation, one imagined situation in which God and evil did coexist, then this argument falls apart. Okay, I want to go into a little bit more detail now on the problem of evil, the logical problem of evil. We're just going to start with a quick history lesson. The first person to really state the problem of evil was Epicurus, who, quoted here by David Hume, says this: "Is he, by the way being God, willing to prevent evil, but not able, then he is impotent." So that first idea then, if he's not able, then he's not omnipotent. That's your first option. Okay. Second option. Is he able? So he is omnipotent, or at least very capable, but not willing. Then he is malevolent. So that's our second option. If he is capable of stopping it, but doesn't want to, then he is not all good. In fact, the accusation goes further for Epicurus, doesn't it? He's saying he's malevolent. Malevolent here actually means, and let me just put this in my definition colour, malevolent means, of course, that God isn't in some way evil. And finally, says Epicurus, Is he both able and willing? Whence then is evil? Why then is there evil? So this was put into the logical form of the problem of evil by J.L. Mackie. Now, J.L. Mackie's central point is that kind of the triadic God, which is this God, and evil are contradictory. They cannot both exist. This is sometimes put down as the inconsistent triad, which he outlines as this. First of all, on one part of the triangle, we have God's omnipotence, so God's all-powerfulness. On another part of the triangle, we have God as wholly good, so he's entirely good and he's all-powerful. And then the final part of the triangle is that evil exists. Now, Mackie says, actually, this isn't inconsistent. This isn't contradictory in itself. You do need at least one other premise, which is this. Oh, that's an interesting arrow. Which is this, that that good would try to eliminate evil. But he thinks that really that premise, you know, given the kind of Christian concepts of good and evil, would be a relatively obvious one to accept a priori without any empirical data. And then the whole of this, he thinks, means that there is a contradiction. That they can't all be true. You can't have an omnipotent, all-good God with evil existing. There must be a contradiction. There is a contradiction. Sorry, I'm writing on the side there. I know that's extremely annoying. But there is a contradiction. And because, of course, evil exists, we know that a God of this kind doesn't exist. And that is the logical problem of evil.